Welcome back to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast, where life, sports, and medicine intersects. We are glad that you are part of this growing community where we strive to help you strengthen your mindset, help you grow your assets, and help you achieve whatever level of success that you want for your life. Go to our website at Dr.Derrick, thesportsdoctor.com, where you can find all the latest content, and you can also follow us on our social media channels. Now, let's get into this episode. So welcome to another episode of Time Out with the Sports Doctor podcast. We have another great guest for you today, Mr. Brady Howe, who is currently the Grand Canyon University Director of Sports Medicine. He's formerly the VP of Health and Performance with the Phoenix Suns, and he's recently getting away from covering the 3-on-3 men's basketball team in the Olympics. So very glad to have you with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to dig in.
Sure. So let's start off with first things first. Fresh off the Olympics, tell us, what was that like going to Paris and covering some of the best athletes in the world?
Yeah, so I got to correct you there. So I didn't go to Paris. I actually went to Mexico City to cover the select team, which is kind of the next team up, if you will. So you. Like in
okay.
4 years they may be there. But yeah, also I'm gearing up to go on another trip with the Olympic team actually this time. No time wasted at all. We're going to Taiwan in like 2 weeks to start qualifying for LA. So like I said,
wow.
I'm excited about that. But yeah.
It's amazing that it starts that early. I didn't realize that. 4 years ahead of time, huh?
Yeah, the qualifying just is a never-ending process. There's just, and it's similar to the 5-on-5 team that you would see like the NBA players playing. I mean, they have 4 years of putting together teams constantly of just trying to make sure that we're qualifying, which still is a lot easier with the talent that comes out of the NBA and the
Right.
US-based athletes. But it is definitely, it starts immediately.
Sure. So you've been blessed to take care of some of the best athletes literally in the world, and you've done it for, at a high level for a long time now. So let's talk about how you got to where you are now, currently in the athletic training space and in the sports training space overall.
For me, it was just how can I stay working closely associated with athletes? That was a community field that I always felt comfortable in. It was just sports always made sense to me. The relationships, the camaraderie, the ups, the downs, the work ethic, the goal setting, everything that came into it. It was something that I loved and cherished. And when I realized that I could do it from an athletic training standpoint and help athletes prepare ahead of time, but also through crawling through the mud when an injury happened, return to play, all the various phases that come with rehab, transitioning into the strength and conditioning aspects of the spectrum. And that's kind of where, getting my first master's in strength and conditioning, I always found a love for the weight room as an undersized athlete, trying to find my own competitive edge. And so that's really where it all started for me. I didn't lose too much time, I think, in that little gap of what I've seen as the two deaths. For me, it was like I jumped right back into the world of sports, just in a different realm. And it was really an easy transition for me to serve athletes at the highest level.
Yeah, I think similar to me, my two deaths, at least it's good to know when your death is approaching. I knew that I had the opportunity to play small college ball, but it wasn't going to take me far. So I had an injury in high school where first person to take care of me was my athletic trainer and got me in to see an orthopedic surgeon who became a mentor for me. So very similar to you, I knew that I wanted to do medicine, but didn't really know what. So that early exposure helped me get a jump start of becoming an orthopedic surgeon. And then, many times people, they think sports medicine and they think exactly what you are sitting in front of, right? The Phoenix Suns, the big names. But for many people, it's realizing that some people end up there, some people never make it there. And the road to get there for many people is a different route. So for me, I started off in high schools, and I really cherished the time being on that high school sideline, because that's truly where I learned how to be a sports medicine doctor, and thank goodness I wasn't learning on the camera, under the big lights. So I had time to really just learn, okay, this is what happens, and this is how you take care of athletes without having to have all the pressure. Now I'm taking care of Division I athletes, taking care of professional athletes, but just kind of talk about how you ended up on the big stage, in the NBA, taking care of some of the largest or most known athletes in the world.
That's a great question. But to your point, I want to double down on that. I think there was a 1 year period between, I've kind of bounced around all over the map, where if I really walk through, it'd take a while. But if I walk through the timeline that I've taken,
Right.
in the various roles, there was a blip on the radar where I'd stepped away out of just sheer burnout of working at the college level and the minor league basketball level. And I was a high school teacher and I covered the high school, back where I grew up. And that was probably one of the most, rewarding, fulfilling, and memorable years that I had in my career, that kind of rejuvenated me again, if you will. And within a year, the Utah Jazz came calling again with kind of a new adventure, and been in professional basketball ever since, until just recently. And so I think that there is no one golden road or, a blueprint to get to this level. I feel like I've been a part of many, many others as either a friend, a coach, a mentor, if you will, of those who are trying to get to that. Their aspirations are so high. And it's really fun to see people experience this, but it's how I got here. Honestly, some days I couldn't even tell you. Some of
Yeah.
it comes down to sheer relationships and networking,
Yeah.
and some of it's luck, timing. But like, one of my favorite quotes is, success is when preparation meets opportunity,
Opportunity.
so you
Yep.
just be ready for it. You be ready to adjust and adapt. And one thing that I have always been big on is just taking an opportunity. I won't say that I'm a yes man per se, but even the smaller opportunities, people need to be willing and ready to jump. Those are
Yeah.
conversations that I have with some people who want to be in the NBA or the NFL so badly, but they quickly they want the microwavable approach with how
Right.
modern, our society and social media has promoted, making it look easy, whether it's, I've made it look easy yourself. And it's like, oh, I've verbatim had that like question, like, I want what you have, man. And they just think, oh, if I can have it tomorrow. I'm like, hold on, let's actually reverse engineer the
Yeah.
last 15 years of my career to talk about how I got here. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's definitely been a long journey, but certainly a rewarding one.
Absolutely. And I want to first start off by applauding, all the athletic trainers out there, because I feel that athletic trainers, number one, are usually not appreciated, underpaid, right? And I always preach that the importance of building a sports medicine practice is based off your relationship with athletic trainers. I can be the best doctor, I can do the best surgery, but you have your hands on the athletes when they're injured. And if the athlete doesn't trust you and doesn't trust the relationship that we have, then they can go elsewhere. But when you have an athletic trainer who is very well trained and can take care of the athlete immediately when they're injured, and then reach out and say, hey, I have this person, they're coming to see you. That relationship is what really makes sports medicine flourish. It makes a doctor look good, because athletic trainers have to be there before the event starts and have to be there long after the event is over, between doing the training, cutting the tape off, doing all the cleaning up. The hours are just crazy that athletic trainers put into sports, even from covering lower level, middle school or high school athletics. The hours just don't add up to the pay for athletic trainers. So, I'm very appreciative as a sports medicine physician, because I know that I've gotten to where I am because of my relationships with athletic trainers. So I definitely feel that what you do is many times overlooked, and the value of what you bring to the table for sure is not really understood by most people.
Well, no, I appreciate you saying that. So a lot of gratitude for you just kind of highlighting that, because it certainly, it takes a village, right? If you
Yeah.
look at from a high school to the highest level, the continuum of all the moving pieces involved that are serving the athlete, and from the team physician, who is obviously just at the top of, like, we rely on so many specialists to play a certain role and just to step in when their number is called, right? It's like, it's hard, and it's hard to put those pieces delicately in order and having
Yeah.
them know when they are served. But from the athletic training standpoint, yeah, I don't think a lot of people know what they're signing up for when they go through the
Yeah.
curriculum and the
Yeah.
clinicals, and then you realize I probably can count on one hand how many I went through school with who were still actively athletic trainers in the field as their profession, rather than
Sure.
finding another job that gave them weekends off, paid them more to do less. So it definitely requires the right person to serve in these roles and to serve at a high level, because of the time commitment. And you said the hours it take, it's absolutely a thankless job, but they're some of the most like dedicated and bright people that I've been fortunate to learn from. And if you really were to count up all the hours and the financial pay that it's given, it's kind of sickening to think how many what you're
No, I
making
hear
on an
you.
hourly rate. But
Yeah.
you fall in love with it. You fall in love with the relationships, the network that you build of a community. I've loved just learning from individuals such as yourself, like when it comes to, the team structure, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if it wasn't for certain team physicians that I've worked alongside who've said, hey, we've got a dislocated elbow, you know what I mean? And talk me
Mhm.
through it. Of course, athletic trainers have a scope that they're not supposed to do certain things, but man, I've learned so many valuable lessons from team physicians and really everybody that's a part of the team. Just it's
Yeah.
helped me to grow and shape myself as a person.
Yeah. And you mentioned burnout earlier, but burnout is real in the athletic training space. So I can imagine that there's a shortage similar to in medicine, because I know that I've been in sports medicine now for 13 years, and I can count probably out of the 10 athletic trainers that I work with, probably half of the people have left the field completely or thinking about transitioning, because it's a grueling job and it's a grueling lifestyle more so of just it's never off. And we can talk a little bit about what actually happens in the off season, which can be sometimes for you the busiest season, right? We talk about in
Absolutely.
the NBA, you can play easily if you make the playoffs, an 8 month season. So you have 4 months that's considered the off season, but you still have to do, work at the end of the season for people that are injured. And you have preseason camp and rookie camp and summer camp. So let's just talk about a little bit about kind of the grind of taking care of high level athletes, especially in the NBA, because, so many people want your job, but let's kind of explain what it really looks like.
Yeah, let's just stick to the off season. To your point,
Yeah.
if you're fortunate, you went and won a championship, right? That's what we're all chasing. And
Right.
myself being very fortunate to in my career experience the finals just once. I mean, I've had mentors who were in the NBA for 35 years and didn't make it past the second round. So if you're a fortunate one, you go from having that experience to then of course, a shorter off season, but you don't almost get any time off. So in the NBA, the month of August is kind of like your guaranteed slowest month to take some time to yourself. But if you didn't make the playoffs at all, you're going to get a little bit of a time off, as the playoffs start. Usually tell the athletes to take 2 weeks, get away, clear your minds, go on a trip, see your family. And then you'd be surprised some teams get right back to it, especially if you're a younger team and you got a lot of player development to establish. But there is no time wasted. It instantly seems like here's June and we got a whole month of what we call pre-draft workouts, whether those are private individual workouts of potential top 10 picks or they're group workouts where you usually would bring 6 players in and have them work out together. And you're basically scouting these players. Do we want to make an investment and draft this guy? And then the end of June, there's the draft. Yeah, and then after that, it's right into summer league. Summer league takes up a good 2-3 weeks of July, and then when that ends, and this entire time that's going on, you still have your contracted players. So players want to stay local and work out. They want the big name players who are traveling the world. We tend to send a couple of practitioners with those guys to make sure that they have exactly what they need. There's a lot of time collaborating with these players' private staffs, which has grown immensely in the last decade to where they have their own full-time PTs, massage
Wow.
therapists, strength coaches. And so it's a nonstop working clock, really. As you said earlier, there's really no set schedule for an athletic trainer or the support staff in professional basketball.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for giving that explanation. And let's just talk about now because you're in a time of transition. So you're going from the NBA now to being over a major Division I college. So talk about that transition. Talk about some of the thoughts behind making that transition, and what were some of the reasons that you chose to go from that level?
I was actually at a place in my life, if I was being honest, where I was almost entering that burnout feeling again. This
Mhm.
was a job, all I ever wanted. I believe it or not, I have that my first semester in college was in an entry level English class, and I wrote an essay, about my career that was going to be in the NBA. So I knew that this was a dream of mine. And after doing it for a while, I mean, as we just touched on, the work hours that go into it, everything that's associated, it's a grind, And so I'd kind of reached the point, and I was at a level where my contract was coming up, and there's a lot of moving pieces, new ownership group coming in. It was kind of shifting and evolving with the culture. Everything that for me, I was just like, I got a 10-year-old little girl. All she's ever known is my travel. I'm gone a third of the year. I'm just my work hours. So it was a reflection point for me. Like, what do I want out of this? Like, I had overachieved anything I had ever set for my career path. Like, whether that be a title, whether that be just everything that I experienced. And I just had this point where I was like, what am I doing this for? I've clearly shown that I can do the work. I'm built for it. I love it. But I also have a much higher love for other things, my family, my mental health, if you will. And all those things were pointing in the direction that I just needed to change. So fortunately, timing and place, like every phase of my career, GCU was an opportunity that came on my table. And as I went through the process of interviewing, it was just like, kind of like I said, the high school experience. I was like, it was just time to take a leap of faith, and felt right. And so far this summer, I have not had near the work schedule that I've had where I was in the NBA. And it's just going to pan out to be one of the best decisions for me, because I'm going to grow as a person, as a practitioner, and never know, it may just rejuvenate me and I find myself doing this forever, or again, maximizing the next opportunities that come up in the future.
Yeah. And thank you for, really that vulnerability to share kind of some of your thoughts around it, because I can imagine the pressure of I'm here. And then, that doing what you're doing is not taking a step back. It's doing what's best for you. But I can imagine for people looking on, they're saying, why in the world would you leave the NBA? I had that same thing when I was starting my career in a very small town. People are like, why are you there? And, because sometimes that's where you need to be. And I think that people need to hear that just because you can get to a certain level doesn't mean that season is forever. Everything's for a season. Life changes. I mean, I understand. I have 3 kids now, 2 that are in middle school, and they're demanding on my time. And then my son is 9 years old, and he expects me to be his coach. It's cool to get him on the sidelines and behind the scenes, but Dad, we're coaching this year, right? All right, every day. Do we have the roster yet? Let's work on this playbook. So it's cool to be the sports doctor, but you have to be a dad. You have to be a husband. You have to take care of yourself. And it's a lot of pressure that comes along with it. So, thank you for opening up about some of the thoughts that you had to go through, because sometimes you have to, at the right time, the right job, at the wrong time, it's not the right job anymore. So, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it comes down to, it's very easy to get lost in the world today with the cost, what
Yeah.
I call the cost of comparisons, or, chasing other people's pockets and what they've got, whether it be followings, whether that be finances, cars, it's easy to succumb to that. And for me, it was just the reflection point, where I'm at in my life, my career. And it was actually a lot easier decision than you think.
Yeah.
I'm very thankful and grateful for the opportunities. Like when I stepped away from the NBA, and every time I've transitioned away from a team, whether it was the Utah Jazz, the Atlanta Hawks, I've just made sure, that I was at peace with this, and I left on a high note and with positive regards to a sense of gratitude for the opportunity those teams had given me, and knowing that I gave it my best, And I just know that it's a never ending moving target, this life. We kind of tend to think in some jobs or on teams or relationships that, hey, I have acquired this. I've got it. It's good forever. And then you
Yeah.
get subtle life reminders, a death in the family, something happens, you just got to have gratitude for what you currently have and realize it's a blessing, and you make the best of it. And that's kind of what I've done, because it was tough to make those transitions, but at the same time, it was easy at the same time, knowing why I was doing it.
As healthcare providers, we spend a large portion of our lives focused on our training as well as taking care of other individuals. But I'm calling a timeout, because life can change in an instant. We know it's difficult to fathom that a sudden illness, injury, or death could put you and your family in a devastating financial situation. That's where Dr. Stephanie Pearson and her unique team of advisors at Pearson Ravitz come into play. They focus on empowering physicians like yourself to protect your most valuable asset, your income, and life's most important people, your family. So go to pearsonravitz.com to make sure that you are protected today.
And I think that's going to help people hearing kind of the process of being at peace with your decision. No matter what other people say, you know that this is best for, you and your family at this point. And that's really all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. There's always, as they say, it's like, LeBron and them have had that catchphrase saying it's bigger than basketball. You know what I mean? It is. I mean, you've got to realize values the things that are most important to you. That's why I referred to the two deaths, because I mean, some people who may have spent, a lifetime growing into sports and getting to the college level. I mean, those athletes are within the 5%ers, right? To have a Division I opportunity like yourself. And man, what a blessing that is. But then still knowing like, hey man, like, am I good enough, or am I going to be a pro athlete? Some have that chance and maybe get a chance for 1 year. That's a blessing again, but for some athletes, again, a 20-year NBA career guy, that's absurd. Like it's insane. Like really a 5-year, or if you get to your second contract, most NBA guys or pro athletes, they're looking to get to the second contract because they almost just know, if I've made that benchmark, like it's kind of like, a lot of stress has been taken off their shoulders because there's constant turnover. So there's a lot to that as far as just, embracing where you're currently at and not really living in the past or the future, which kind of leads to constant either fear-based anxiety or stress about what's ahead, because there's so much uncertainty that you have no control over a lot of things. And that's hard for people to embrace.
Yeah. You kind of led me down this path. So I want to talk about the injured athlete. We're very privileged to be able to deal with injured athletes. And as you were talking, I was thinking about some of the emotions, and, you're being able to call your shots now on your own. But many times for an athlete, you think you're on your way up and it's over. And it can be just that rapid. You're having the best season of your career and a major injury, and you're never the same. And dealing with athletes, they're under so much pressure and under so much scrutiny that many times they don't have anyone that they feel that they can trust, or anyone that they feel that they can really express how they're feeling. You have an agent or a coach or whoever who's trying to get you back. And many times they're struggling mentally, even when they are physically well again, to be able to get back. So let's spend a little time talking about dealing with a whole athlete, not just having an injury where you have an injury, you have a surgery, you rehab, and you're ready to go back, but the mental part of performance and the mental part of it, especially for an injured athlete, to being able to trust their body, trust their knee, their ankle, whatever it is, that you're well again and you're not going to get re-injured, which I think is one of the biggest fears for athletes trying to return after an injury. So let's talk about that for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, where do we start when we talk about bridging the physical with the mental aspect of the athletes? I term it myself, my philosophy is a player-centered or player-centric philosophy, just meaning, in the world of mental health practitioners, there is kind of a theory of the person-centered approach, right? Which is trying to take in every facet of what that person might be experiencing, because it is very easy to look at superstar athletes and just assume, oh, they've got it all put together. They're genetically specimens, like they're wealthy, they're good looking, they have everything every one of us could ever want, right? Like what could they possibly have to worry about, be stressed about? But this is their livelihood, like as you've heard a lot of athletes explain, like they put their life's work, like their life's master, like craft into this commitment that's been their whole life. And in an instant, an injury that may require surgery, that's a vulnerable time. Who do I trust? That's kind of where we've gotten to a place where I don't blame people for wanting 2, 3, 4 opinions, because that's what I would want. I would want to do that. And I would hope that I'm hearing the same message across the board, that this is the best plan of action. You're in great hands, but to put your hands and potentially your life's craft of your career in a physician's hand like yourself, or somebody like myself on the rehab process, there's a lot at stake there. And they instantly the wheels are spinning, is my career over? What am I going to do if I can't play again? Like they start thinking of all the lifestyle changes that they have never thought about before. So yeah, it becomes a really quick slippery slope when an athlete has a significant injury. And for us to be able to see it on the back end, it's hard to even explain it to a fan if you could, you know what I mean, of just the sheer trauma and torture that they put themselves through, not just physically, because of course it is painful to be hurt. It is painful to be mobilized, to have surgery, to deal with neurological issues that you got to come back with, the atrophies. There's just like, think of the most common one we all refer to, which is like an ACL, and just, it's like, this athlete's out 12 months, you know what I mean? Like, if they're lucky, they get back sooner, but like playing at a high level and conditionally fit, we're looking at 12 months depending on the sport. So there's so much that goes into it. And I'm really glad you asked, because this is kind of the third facet of my career that I have recently adjusted to. So this month, actually, I'm graduating with my second master's degree that's in psychology. And the only reason I did that was to be able to take the CMPC exam and become like a mental performance consultant. And that all started with this exact topic, because as much time as I'd seen injured athletes go through surgery, I've myself sat in on the surgeries, and I want to be with that athlete from cut to back to cutting on the court, if you will. And there's so much in that in between that, fans and just the world around them, they lose track of them. After 12 months, you're not even thinking about a certain athlete unless it's a big prolific player. So strength coaches, athletic trainers, PTs, the head coach, they are all psychologists in their right mind, if you really think about the relationship that they foster with the athlete.
Yeah.
And that's really paramount. And so for me, I wanted to be able to learn this myself. And in doing so, I realized how many things I left on the table as an athlete, a college athlete. Like, why would I perform so well in practice when I didn't feel those pressures of fans watching? And this was before social media. You know what I mean?
Right.
Now that's a whole nother can of worms, but it's a great topic. I could talk until I'm blue in the face and for hours, because there's just so many factors and contextual layers that go into working with the injured athlete that, man, for me, it just, I think of isolation. And if it even is a minor injury, that let's say an athlete's out 6 to 8 weeks, right? A broken bone, where it's like, all right, this is unfortunate. Good news and bad news, you're going to be back, no long-term implications, but you're out 6 to 8 weeks, right? Just the sheer gut wrench that they feel like they've been casted away from the tribe, so to speak, right? This goes back centuries, where certain tribes they wouldn't punish you physically. They would just outcast you. And that was the worst form of punishment. That's what these athletes feel. So it's a much higher need for a support staff to take into account the mental toll that needs to be supported than just the physical rehab back to sport, because it's very easy for people to just think, oh, just get him back healthy, he's good, but what he's going through mentally is a much bigger climb than the physical return to play process.
Yeah, many times you hear, oh, it's just an ankle sprain, it's just an ACL. Number one, newsflash, what you hear in the public is not really what happened, right? It's just an ACL, but you don't know that he has a meniscus tear and a cartilage defect too. So, they're expecting, okay, athlete A had an ACL and was back in 9 months. Why is athlete B taking 18 months? Because you might not have the full picture. However, it doesn't mean that athlete A and B are not under the same pressure to be back on the court. So it's just so many factors that the public don't really know about, but they still scrutinize like they do.
Yeah. And now this is where I'll flip it back to you and give my gratitude to you and the orthopedic surgeons who play such a big role in this equation, because as soon as that athlete is injured, and the athletic trainers may even know within the first assessment on the court, this is what we're dealing with. You kind of know when and where to pick your battles of what you share until you're confident in the diagnosis.
Right.
But that conversation with the orthopedic physician and the bedside manner, we quote unquote call it, of how to connect with that athlete and to share what needs to be shared and how that information is disclosed. That right there is the biggest differential between trust and distrust in the entire system. And if that's not done well, then instantly that mental psychological warfare is either going to go in a positive direction or a negative. And to your point, that may have been the planted seed that grows and evolves into this athlete coming back 3 months sooner or later than should have been. That the mental preparations revolved around it. I truly believe it all starts with those early conversations of on the field assessment, on the sideline, and it just is a layer after layer. But it absolutely starts with how well the physician can build that trust of what they're experiencing.
Yeah, and that's something that's not taught. And I think one thing is the consistency in your message. You can't say one thing today and then come back tomorrow with a whole different plan, or you have a trainer telling one thing and then the surgeon comes in and says something else, and then you go to therapy and they give you another whole different story. So you have to have communication across the board with your team. I think that's one thing. And what I've learned, that's the hardest conversation to have in sports. I don't know if I come in and say, hey, how's your day going? I just got your MRI, you tore your ACL, or just boom, hey, you tore your ACL, this is what it is, right? It's very tough. And I know that as soon as I say you tore your ACL, it's probably like the words are coming out of my mouth in slow motion and the conversation is over at that point. So I say, look, you got to go through the acceptance of this diagnosis, number one. So go home, cry, scream, do whatever you got to do. And then let's come back and let's get our game plan together, because you can talk for 20, 30 minutes after you told them the ACL is torn. You can forget about it. They're going to be calling back the next day like, what did they say? What's the plan? It's very difficult, but you have to build the trust. And if you don't have the relationship already, it's even more difficult to build a trust with that athlete. But like you mentioned, if you don't have it, then that makes a huge difference in the treatment and the recovery. Are you always being second guessed? Any little thing, have you lost your athlete?
Yeah. I mean, the athlete wants to know that you're in their corner, what
Absolutely.
I mean? Also, which is also the reason why athletes now at the highest level who have the financial means to build their own team, that's where we've gotten to. It is all stemmed around trust or distrust, what I mean?
Yeah.
And so that's been the last 7 years of my career, building a staff and the full-fledged team, if you will, that supports these things, because everybody needs to be on the same page, speaking the same language, and just knowing when it's their turn to step in and play their role.
Absolutely.
Because at the highest level, that can become a challenging thing if you're not on the same page. It's very easy for people to want to reach for certain athletes' attention because they want to be their guy. They want to earn their trust. And some people tend to know that may elevate them to a higher position. So there are a lot of games that go on, the games within the games, if you will, that can become challenging. But these athletes are some of the smartest people in the room, what I mean? And that includes sitting in the room with someone like myself and you, who is a trained physician. These athletes can see right through you. This is a people business. And these athletes know, like, whether you're the real deal or you're really full of it, And so that's just being able to have that authentic approach, having some self-disclosure, and I love what you said there, because really to just be able to say, this is the diagnosis, this is what's going on, and then to give them 5-10 minutes, because I've been in those rooms. I can think of one right now. I won't share the name, obviously, but I can think of an athlete who was just told, this is the diagnosis. Hey, we need to do surgery. There's no other way around this. And the physician walks out, and the athlete looks at me and literally just kind of like confirmed with me. He said, what did he just say? Like, did I hear that right? Like, he almost tuned out after hearing the first sentence. So it's really hard for these athletes to take it at times, this bad news. And again, gratitude for you and some of these roles, because how hard is it to have to be the bearer of bad news to share that and to find the right way to share that? It's not easy. I mean, most people crumble under the idea of public speaking. I would rather have the scenario. Would you rather speak in front of 10,000 people, or would you rather sit in front of this superstar athlete and tell them this bad news?
Right. Exactly. I hear you. Well, man, this conversation could go on for hours, but I'm going to wrap it up. So on Time Out with the Sports Doctor, this is your final timeout. So first of all, I'd like to give a shout out to Dr. Brooks Chalet, who paired us up, or who made this introduction. So I really appreciate you introducing me to Brady, because this is a great conversation that we've been able to have. And congratulations to you for all that you've accomplished and for what you're, the new journey that you're embarking on now at Grand Canyon University. So let's end it like this. So, you've achieved a lot throughout your career, and you've been able to, like I mentioned, call your shots some, but talk to the athletic trainer, who might be holding on to their job, or to the injured athlete who's caught in a predicament where, is this the end of my career? Let's just kind of talk a little bit to that person to give them a little, I guess, a little freedom, or a little relieve some of the pressures that they're feeling. How do you usually approach something like that?
Yeah, I have a few ideas that come to mind, but the first thing is just realizing how much locus of control you have around realizing there are some aspects that you can control and there's a lot that you can't. You know what I mean? So being able to realize that opportunities are going to come, they're going to come, they're going to go, and trying to find the best way to make those situations, experience to the fullest is really important, because it's very easy to get one job and then instantly think, oh, I want to level up. I want my director's role, or I want to be at that higher school. And now you're completely negating and neglecting what's right in front of you, and in many of these roles, even if at the high school level, man, there's people that would wait out the door to have your job,
Absolutely.
So having the right mentality of just attacking what's right in front of you, and honestly, just keeping it simple. That's where I would start with people. So there's a lot of people that come to me and they're amazing practitioners that want to be in the NBA so bad. But when I point them in the direction of, hey, there's a lot of turnover and opportunities in the G League every year, like, go start there, see if you're built for this. And they kind of shy away from it. They're just like, no, like they just want to jump to the big leagues, before they've kind of put in their time. So one is just having the gratitude and maximizing the opportunities right in front of you, like being great in the spaces you currently have, controlling what you can control, and then just looking ahead. Like, don't be fearful when certain opportunities do come knocking at your door, because, it's like the cliche of, be careful what you ask for, because you may just get it. Yeah, and this may be another conversation down the road, but the imposter syndrome I experienced when instantly I was elevated into being one of the youngest VPs in the NBA, I was like, that feeling of I'm not ready for this, but just trusting in yourself. Again, we go back to trust of just, you have the right intent, you're doing things the right way, and you do it wholeheartedly, like, you're going to succeed. That's it.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, be where your feet are, right? So master today, let tomorrow take care of itself. These opportunities, sometimes they're not going to come packaged in a perfect box, right? Sometimes you're going to have to take the grimy job to get to the good job. So master where you are and keep moving forward. Brady, thank you for being here. Thank you for bringing your expertise to this podcast, and I really appreciate you.
Of course. Yeah, I had a great time. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for continuing to support this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, then please leave a 5-star review. And if you haven't done so, subscribe so you continue to get the updated episode. Until later, peace.
TimeOut with the sports doctor. Keep our head right in the game. We ain't never stopping. You are now tuned in. Trust you don't want to miss. This is where life, sports, and medicine